So tonight we'll talk to someone who has been through the emotional nightmare that the families of the 239 passengers and crew are now experiencing. She lost her fiancé in an air disaster and knows what the next few weeks and months will be like for these unfortunate people. Obviously very powerful emotions. Our first guest knows all too well. Heidi Snow lost her fiancé in the TWA 800 disaster on Long Island, wrote a book about the experience, and now provides support services for victims of airline casualties at accesshelp.org. Heidi, thanks for being with us. You know, I remember covering your tragedy when I worked in New York. You know, the families at the hotel, we in the media were sort of camped outside. And I wondered then, as I wonder now, what kind of extra pressure is on you going through such enormous personal loss with the entire world watching?
I have to say that this brings us all back. We've had over 1,000 calls for help to Access over the years, and what tends to come up is the same thing with all air disasters. There's that time where we just do not know what happened, and right now those families are all going through that, and we all know and remember too well just not having answers and how difficult it is. And this new development and new information is beneficial to get new information, but at the same point, it still doesn't bring their loved ones back. They still don't have any tangible parts of the plane, and they also just don't have confirmation that their loved ones were actually on board through remains. And I have to say that all of those factors are very critical in the grieving process. At this point, it took 5 weeks for my fiance's remains to be found, and at this point, I just remember going back and forth. I held on to hope 1 hour that somehow he swam away and he survived that, and then an hour later I'd start to begin to have to accept some of the reality. And this whole process back and forth is so difficult, and all of us at Access know what this is like, and we've all been there, and it is just an extremely difficult time for people.
So when you, some of them reacted with really strong anger today. 154 families signed a note accusing the Malaysian military and everybody else of heinous crimes. Do you understand how anger and such visceral anger is part of this moment as well?
Absolutely, and I remember at the site where you were camped out, as you were saying, we were all in the Ramada Inn, and we were all waiting for answers. And in that room, we had people who were just quiet and didn't even know how to respond and were in shock. Then we had those people who were crying, and then we had people in anger, and there are so many emotions in that room. And the main thing we've learned throughout this is that everybody's going to go through it in their own way, and they're going to express their emotions in different ways. And the main thing is for everybody to accept them and recognize that that is how they have to get through it.
So, I mean, after the world's attention moves on, as it did with TWA 800, this is what the people face next, is this enormous vacuum in their lives. I mean, they've been focused for so long on this. What have you found works in helping people through something this catastrophic?
Well, what we do find is after most of these large air disasters is that the hardest time is when the disaster site shuts down and everybody's expected to go home and resume their lives like normal, because they're not all gathering anymore at one location. And that is the most difficult time, and that's really when our phone lines heat up. It's when people have to go back and resume their lives, but they have not even gotten confirmation or any kind of tangible evidence that their loved ones were actually on that flight. And what we do is provide a mentor, somebody else who's been down that road, and they're there for them to talk it through. And so what our mentors do is provide validation and basically a beacon of hope that they can survive this, no matter how horrible it is, that they've gotten through it over time. And so our volunteers serve as role models to help them walk through this process, because it is extremely hard. But knowing somebody else has done it before really does help people get through it.
Yeah, and that's who's on the other end of your phone line. I mean, everybody who works in the organization has been through this. Have you had any calls? I mean, it's early days, but have you had any calls from anybody connected with Malaysian Air's disaster?
Yeah, so we have. About 2 days ago, we started to get our first calls, and what we're getting is similar to so many other air disasters at this phase. It's really just clinging on to hope 1 minute, and then as more information comes in, they starting to face the reality a little bit, and then they go back and forth just holding on to that hope, because there are no remains and there is no physical evidence to confirm. that this, that this is over.
Yeah.
And we all remember it so well, and that's where they are. And no matter what came out today, that new news, which I'm glad that information was relayed directly by the Prime Minister. I think it's important that they get that information in another way other than the press, and do hear it directly from their government. But it still doesn't change the fact that their loved ones are gone.
No. Heidi Snow, thank you. And I'm sure there's a rebound effect for yourself and all the other people who have suffered through this as well. We thank you very much for sharing these thoughts with us. I bet it is.
Thank you so much.